Welcome, everyone. This is the International Peace Coalition. This is the 82nd meeting that we've held in a row. Thank you all for joining us after the holiday period. I know this has been a very intense period right now, and it was very important that people took some time to reflect and raise your spirits and bring your mind to a higher place in these difficult times. My name is Anastasia Battle. I'll be the moderator for you today, as well as Dennis Small and Dennis Speed as my co-moderators for the discussion. We created this forum 82 weeks ago in order to unite the entire peace movement, because quite frankly, it's been fractured and dysfunctional. Many people won't work with one another, and we have to say enough. We are facing thermonuclear World War III, and we need to bring people together of all ideologies who want true peace in order to make this happen. The enemy wants us to be bickering and fighting amongst one another to prevent us from collaborating to achieve this true goal that we want to do. So we have a few people lined up today for the discussion period. I'll post the agenda in the chat in a moment. But to start us off today, I'd like to have Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who's the founder of the Schiller Institute and also the initiator of the International Peace Coalition. So please go ahead, Helga.
Well, let me say hello to all of you, and I hope you had a good Christmas, and I hope you will have a good New Year, especially a whole New Year, because that is not yet certain. As we discussed several times before, the principal crisis that the powers to be may want to use the time before the new President Trump comes into the White House on January 20th does remain the most dangerous period in history ever, and that includes the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, the fact that the Biden administration, despite the fact that they have been clearly voted out, is continuing a policy of provocation, as was demonstrated by the fact that they basically okayed on Christmas Day, on the 25th of December, another batch of ATACMS missiles to be used by Ukraine is an indication that they're not changing policy. And likewise, the fact that the United States has immediately, upon getting rid of the President Assad in Syria, moved to establish a military basis, another one in nearby Damascus, clearly indicates that there also seems to be no change in the policy towards Southwest Asia. Now, what will happen when Trump comes in, if we get to that point, is obviously the big question the whole world is having in their minds. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, in a recent press conference, basically said that they have received encouraging signals, however, that it remains to be seen if these signals are being supported by facts which take into account the security interests of Russia, or if the policy essentially will remain the same. And one cannot blame the Russians that they, after Merkel's and Hollande's admission that they only agreed to the Minsk and Minsk II process in order to gain time for Ukrainians to be built, basically trained and armed up to a NATO standard. With other words, that they were cheating. One cannot blame the Russians and many other broken promises as well, that they keep, extreme caution. Now, Lavrov, in that same press conference, also said that, the Russians do not intend to, threaten even with a nuclear war. That accusation is false. That it was Putin who initiated in 2021 or reminded people of the policy agreed between Gorbachev and President Reagan in 1987, 87, I'm sorry, that nuclear war must never be, can never be won, and therefore can never be fought. and that it was the Russian initiative which got the Permanent Five of the UN Security Council to reiterate that policy. Now, he also reminded people that the very short-lived British Prime Minister Liz Truss had, without any hesitation, said that if she would be prime minister, naturally she would immediately push the nuclear button without hesitation, and that shows a mindset. And he, in the same press conference, also referred, without naming him by name, to Admiral Thomas Buchanan and his recent statement at the CSIS think tank conference, that the United States takes it as their privilege to potentially use a preemptive nuclear strike if they think their hegemony is threatened. However, only with the caveat that the United States should keep enough nuclear weapons so that they could deter future competitors and enemies, which implies that they have the idea that a limited nuclear war can be fought and obviously won, which is a totally ludicrous assumption. And secondly, that after some time that you can have another one of these limited nuclear wars, which is absolutely ludicrous and will not ever happen in this way. So the Russians clearly are on their guard, on high alert, given the fact that the situation in Ukraine is really almost, it's militarily lost, clearly, but nevertheless, the attacks on Russian territory continue. Naturally, the Russians are trying to end that war by military means right now, which naturally is not pretty. But the point is, that since the West is clearly not engaged in serious diplomacy, that has become the Russian mindset, which you may lament about, but that's the reality of the situation. Now, I think that Trump, being Trump, has made already some announcements which one doesn't quite know if it's a joke, if it's meant serious, if it's meant to use Trump tactics to destabilize friends and foes. In any case, he declared that he wants to re-own the Panama Canal, that he thinks that Canada should become integrated into the United States as the 51st state, that he wants to buy Greenland. All of these remarks have caused quite an uproar, and naturally the governments of Panama and Greenland have clearly stated they have no such intentions, in Canada as well. But, does that mean Trump is having a new sense of humor, or is it a threat, or is it meant to destabilize things? In any case, we have to see what comes. Trump has also said that he wants to end the wars. That, unfortunately, we can only speculate about and see what happens, given the fact that the appointments in the Trump administration are very, very mixed. You have people from whom you can expect positive moves. You have old war hawks, China bashers, and so forth. If Trump will run these people with his policies, or if he will be run by them, that remains to be seen. Now, I can report two hopeful signs. They are just steps in the right direction. One is that the Japanese foreign minister visited Beijing just a few days ago and agreed on a very, very far-reaching agreement with China, with Wang Yi, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, on cooperation between Japan and China, including many aspects, very importantly, that they would further each other's classical tradition. Now, I think this is a very clear sign that maybe Japan does not want to agree with global NATO in the Pacific, and hopefully that, that is real and would be a step in the right direction. Also, the fact that President Putin announced that following his meeting with Slovakian Prime Minister Fico, who attended the summit in St. Petersburg of the Eurasian Economic Union, they basically announced that Putin agrees to have Slovakia potentially the venue for peace talks on Ukraine. Now, I think that's a very promising sign. It indicates clearly that there is a willingness of Russia to enter such peace negotiations. And, Fico also has said many times that he sees Slovakia together with Ukraine, Hungary, one can say, as a bridge potentially between Russia and the Western European countries. So this is very promising. Now, if you look at the situation in the Middle East, I mean, we had a discussion among people from the IPC and the Schiller Institute yesterday and today, trying to figure out what is the situation, because frankly, I find it very confusing. On the one side, the way how the Syrian government was ousted in 11 or 12 days was clearly a big surprise to many. What followed afterwards, Israel annexing not only Golan Heights, but parts of the Syrian territory beyond it, the Turkish control over other parts of Syria, the US remaining in parts of Syria as well. That all is, a big question mark. What is the future of Syria? And, Israeli shelling continued against Yemen. So it's a very, very volatile situation. Now, the new leadership, the so-called HTS, all the people who are now the new government have a history that they were founding members of al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda. The new head of government, al-Shara, formerly al-Julani, had a $10 million bounty on his head until, actually a few days ago. And he is now the new head, and others of that tradition as well. Now, what attitude one should take to that? It seems that, there is an agreement between Russia, Turkey, Iran, the Gulf states, Lebanon, that, the one thing which must be prevented is that Syria would now go the way of Libya. If you remember, after the NATO bombing of Libya in 2011 and the killing of Gaddafi, the country completely fell into, warfare among all the different groupings, being a horrible failed state ever since. And obviously, if this would happen in Syria, it would be a catastrophe, not only for the Syrian people, but for the whole region. So it seems that, from what Lavrov also said, Russia did not sever diplomatic relations. They keep talking, they are talking to the new government. They emphasize that Russia has long-standing ties with Syria, that tens of thousands of Syrians have been educated in universities in Russia. There are 5,000 Syrian students in Russia right now. And, that Russia wants to keep both the UN Security Council process on Syria, also the Astana process. And it seems that the other participants in the Astana process also have expressed that they want to try to fight for stability. Hopefully, the new government is serious about the transforming into, a new form of government. Charles Freeman, funnily enough, had said that this new head of the government, al-Shara, as he's now called, is a liberal, moderate jihadist, which, hopefully this will change. As I said, I have a difficulty of understanding it, but what is also very clear is that there is a complete powder keg, that there are many different factions and different groupings allied with different forces. So it's a powder keg, and I am hoping that other participants of this discussion will shed some more light on the situation. Having said that, the danger that Netanyahu may feel that the wind is in his sails, that supposedly major opponents of him have been knocked out. Gaza is a complete horror show. The genocide is escalating, if that's even possible. New reports are that the children of Gaza are 95% of them think they will die shortly. 50% of the children think they should die any moment because it would be better than to live on. As I said, that the world public watches this. In my view, this is one of the most horrible things, and I have the distinct impression that the Western failure, the indifference of the West, of the Europeans, to stop this genocide will remain with us as a big burden in the formation of whatever new order we hopefully can create, because that indifference shows a degree of moral decadence which is hard to swallow. Now, that's the situation in Gaza. The Hezbollah has clearly been weakened with Syria knocked out. Now the new statements by Gallant and others that they will, now go after the Houthis in Yemen and there was a bombing of the Sanaa airport, which almost killed the head of the WTO, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, who was almost killed because his plane was attacked. He was fortunately not killed, but some people around it. And this was strongly condemned by UN General Secretary Guterres, because whoever made that attack probably knew that he was there. So that situation is feared to be escalating, and the question is what will happen between Israel and Iran before Trump gets into office. Now, there are people warning that, given the fact that the Russians are clearly on the side of Iran and will not allow any major attack on Iran, I would tend to think. The fact that the Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi is just in Beijing renewing their 25-year agreement, that means, Iran is not alone. They're allied with Russia, with China. So if Israel would attack Iran, including, trying to take out the nuclear facilities, which only could be done with nuclear weapons, that brings in immediate vicinity the danger of a general, not only a regional war, but a war which could get global. And I'm talking about the next period. There are people warning, however, that Israel should be mindful of the fact that you cannot just destroy the military facilities of your neighbor country and then think that is enough to live in peace forever. These are the words of Lavrov, more or less. I'm synthesizing them. And the Israeli historian Ilan Pappé warned, that he thinks that this is the beginning of the end of Israel, because if you create so many enemies and you are geographically situated in the middle of the Arab region, that this may very well turn back on Israel big time, not far in the future. So I'm just describing the extremely explosive situations, both around Ukraine and around Iran. And that, brings back the question that I think, that unless we move to a completely new paradigm, whereby we stop thinking in terms of geopolitics. Geopolitics is a mental disease. It should be eradicated. And we must replace it by, respect for the national sovereignty of every country. We have to respect the security interest of every country. And we have to put the proposal for a new security and development architecture on the agenda this coming year. So that is, I think also, that Trump alone, by making America great again, without taking into account that other countries also have a right for development and the unfolding of their potential. Maybe it's possible with Trump, but there are many ifs. So I can only say the role of the international peace coalition must be to increase our efforts to put such a new paradigm on the table, and hopefully our joint efforts can contribute to that task in the short term.
Thank you very much, Helga, for that. And I'll make sure to include in the chat a link for people to see or to read the 10 principles that you've written on creating a new security and development architecture. I think this is very important for people to read over and think about how would we create a world which would take into consideration the security concerns of every nation on the planet. How would you create that? So I'll make sure to include that for everyone to look at. So next, I'd like to go to our good friend, Ray McGovern, who I'm sure many people know who he is, but if you don't, he is a former CIA analyst. He is the co-founder of Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, and quite frankly, a very feisty interventionist, and I'm very thankful to have him on today. So please go ahead, Ray McGovern. Oh, you're muted there, my friend.
May I be heard? Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you for having me back. I have to say that I've participated with great delight or great concern in most of the 82 sessions of this wonderful group. And I compliment Helga for setting the stage so well. That's what I was going to say. She really should be briefing the new president as he comes in, as I used to do to old presidents. Let me start by something new. I think it was just yesterday that Putin revealed something I had not known. I don't think anybody knew. Putin and his predecessors as head of Russia were not about to reveal secret talks with their opposite numbers, particularly the U.S. president. But here does Putin refer to what happened on the 16th of June, 2021, during the first year of Biden's presidency. They met in Geneva, and they met, of course, with Tony Blinken telling President Biden what to say and what to do. All we knew was what Biden told Putin, and that was, look, Mr. Putin, we know you got real problems. You got that long, thousands of miles of border with China. We know that they're aspiring to be the biggest military as well as economic power, and they're squeezing you. We know you're squeezing you, but we understand all that, and it must be really hard, Now, nothing could have been farther from reality. Russia and China have been joined together mostly because of what the U.S. was doing as never before, but these guys didn't get it. They didn't get it then, and they don't get it now. That is the tectonic shift in international relations of this century, Russia and China together, and with many very, very close allies, Iran now, for example, and other places, Belarus, of course, India and others joining in. That's the new constellation of forces. Biden and Blinken just didn't get it, okay? Now, what else did Putin say yesterday? Biden said to me in Geneva on 16 June 2021, he wanted me to delay Ukraine's admission into NATO by 10 to 15 years because Kiev is not ready yet, quote, end quote. Putin said, whether it's in 1 year or 10 years, from the standpoint of history, that's about a blink in the eye, okay? Blink of an eye, I should say. So that's, to all intents and purposes, non-negotiable. That, of course, is the reason for the special military operation, the basic reason. And you don't have to believe me. Simply take the words of NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg addressing the European Parliament more than a year ago, when he said, the Russians, they said you don't want enlargement of NATO, and you don't want Ukraine in NATO, but we're going to continue to get Ukraine in NATO. And meanwhile, we got Finland and Sweden, and so it's already enlarged. So you say you're going to invade? You say you're going to invade Ukraine if we keep trying to get it into NATO? We say no. And so they invaded Ukraine. Huh? So, if you need any further proof, the Russians made it clear to the new President Biden in June of 2021. This was the major stumbling block. And of course, Stoltenberg spilled the beans by saying they made a last-minute offer, both to NATO and to the United States, in December of 2021, saying this is our position. And we went ahead, and then they invaded, says Stoltenberg. And what's the big joke for Stoltenberg? NATO got enlarged anyway, the Finlands and the Swedens. Like, that's the kind of Wahnsinn that is running. Now, I chose that German word because it has always meant to me something really, really stronger than just crazy, okay? Wahnsinn. It means, well, I looked it up today because I was so curious to see if I was quite right. And it turns out that I did remember it correctly. It's sheer madness, okay? Das ist doch heller Wahnsinn. That is sheer madness, insanity, idiocy, okay? Delusion, thinking things are there even though they're not there. Now, why do I mention that? Well, that's been prevailing among the Bidens and the Blinkens and the Sullivans of this world who are running U.S. policy. Combine that with being sociopaths. These people are not affected with any empathy. Witness the genocide that my government is authorizing and enabling and arming that Israel is doing in Gaza and the West Bank now. So now this goes 30 years, this Wahnsinn. Madeleine Albright famously said, we have to be not only exceptional, we have to be the indispensable country of the world. That was 30 years ago, okay? Indispensable, okay? Now, why do I mention that? I mention that because Biden, in some major speeches last year and this, referred amazingly, admiringly to what Madeleine Albright had said. Yeah, that's us. That's wahnsinnig, okay? Wahnsinn. So, where does this leave us? Well, that was 30 years ago. Madeleine Albright could also say, when she was asked by an interviewer, Madam Secretary, 500,000 children under the age of 5 have died because of the sanctions that you put in against Iraq. Do you think that's worth it? And without blinking an eye, Madeleine Albright said, yes, of course, we think it's worth it. Okay. Wow. Okay, talk about Wahnsinn combined with sociopathy. Well, there you have it right there. And the reason I mention it is because Biden thinks that she's sort of the guidepost to how you conduct foreign relations. Add to the fact that she famously turned to Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Colin Powell at the time and said, Powell, you have the greatest army in the world. Why don't you just use it? Okay. That's the mentality that is outdated now, but combine that with a a Trump derangement syndrome prevailing in our country, well, they tend to accept this notion that we have to prevail no matter what. Now, let me just move on to what Helga said about what's going to happen to Canada or Panama, Greenland, Mexico. So put yourself in Putin's shoes. And I've been trying to do that for Russian and Soviet leaders for a really long time, okay? Put yourself in their shoes. This is not only wahnsinnig, but it's the thing they hate worst, unpredictability. Trump is the paragon of instability, unpredictability. So over these next few weeks, okay, till January the 20th, they have to be at high alert. They've already put their conventional forces at higher alert. I imagine their nuclear forces will also be at high alert because there's no telling what these guys are going to do. Now, is there precedent for them escalating? Well, remember when we weren't going to send tanks and we weren't going to we were going to send F-16s, and then we weren't going to allow attacker missiles to hit deeper into Russia. Remember all that stuff? Well, you're in the Kremlin, right? And you say, what's the next escalation? And then you hear somebody at Strategic Command in Omaha say, well, I think we can win a nuclear war. You have to be really ready to deal with that. And that's the flashpoint. If we get by these next 3 weeks, I think we'll be able to breathe a little easier because there's no predicting what Blinken, who I think is running this shop, and Sullivan are going to get Biden to authorize. There is some hope that our military will resist destroying the rest of the world because they know full well what will happen. Hate to be so gloomy about all this, but what are the good signs? Well, I think that Trump and Putin can get together on terms acceptable to both. And I'm an outlier on this because everyone else either doesn't look at it my way or they're affected by Trump derangement syndrome, or they take at face value what Kellogg and others people are saying already. But look, here's what Putin can promise. Okay, you twisted my arm, Trump. All right, I'm not going to invade Poland. I'm not going to invade the Baltic states. I promise you, I'm not even going to take over the rest of Ukraine. So there's a big concession that you can sell to the American people. They believe what Biden said about me going into Poland. I mean, you've been in Poland? Well, anyhow, all right, here you go. Kursk. Well, Trump can say, what Putin has said? He said that rather than kill or captive all those 10,000 Russian POWs in Kursk, well, we'll give them back. We're not going to kill them. That will be a bargaining point as well. And we'll create a buffer zone. It's sort of like a DMZ, where we'll limit the number of weapons on each side. And, NATO, well, okay, we rejected Biden when he said 5, 10, 15 years. How about 50 years? And Putin will say 35, and Trump will say deal. What is NATO going to look like in just 5 or 10, much less 35 years? It's already falling apart, not only in Europe where it's supposed to be, but also in the Far East, as Helga has so pointedly pointed out. Even Japan, my God, even Japan, havoc in South Korea. There's lots going on in the Far East that is very, very disquieting to the U.S. and NATO. So how do I finish up here? I would just say we're at a liminal point here, there's a little gap now of 3 weeks. As the British say, mind the gap, okay? or as the Russians say in similar terms, or getting off the metro, осторожно, двери закрываются. Okay, careful, the doors are closing themselves. Okay, well, the door is closing itself, not only on this year, but on this administration. And so we can breathe a lot easier, I think, in 3 weeks. But right now, we have to do what we can, and that means not remain silent. That's why it's such a pleasure to be with you all who don't remain silent and do what you can in your particular circumstance to stop this Wahnsinn, to stop this madness. Now, last thing I'll say is that I am very fond of I feel very honored to know people like Archbishop Romero in San Salvador, who famously said, ser cristiano hoy en día significa no temer, no callar por miedo. Ser cristiano, well, I would change that to ser humano, to be a human being. Hoy en día, today, means no temer, not to be afraid, no callar por miedo, not to keep silent out of fear. That's what this group, this Schiller group, is doing. My applause and a Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you very much, Ray McGovern, for that. And it's true. Many people on here have been incredibly active throughout this period. And I know that people have been doing Christmas distributions of leaflets and going out and talking to people. And if you do have a report, please let me know or raise your hand during the discussion period and report on what you got and what you did. It'd be very useful to find out later on. So thank you very much, Ray. We're going to continue with our opening section with Larry Johnson, who is also a friend of Ray McGovern and the International Peace Coalition. He's been on here a number of times. He's a retired CIA official and is one of the co-founders of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. So although Larry likes to say, well, Ray just grabbed me and pulled me on and made me do it. But he's definitely a force to reckon with. So thank you so much for joining us, Larry.
Well, thank you and Happy New Year to all. I would like to take credit for being a co-founder of VIPS, but clearly the credit goes to Ray for that. I'm not one of those CIA guys that likes to usurp everybody else's accomplishments and claim them as my own. Even though I was trained that way. Okay, so a few comments about the mess that is Syria. All the sort of Western jubilation from 3 weeks ago when Assad fell, starting to fade because the reality is sinking in. No one is in control, but the one country that's most likely to be in a position to try to control events is Turkey or Turkiya. And Erdogan has never been one known for being shy or humble, and his vision, even though he's climbed into bed with Israel, and this is not the first time that Israel has shared, let's call it strange bedfellows. Recall that in 1980, 81, Israel was in the forefront of encouraging the Reagan administration to allow Israel to provide Iran, the same Iranians who were holding Americans hostage, the same Iranians who were under the rule of the Ayatollah Khomeini. That same Iran, Israel insisted on providing arms to. And, ultimately Ali North got into the act, providing, weapons to the Iranians. And there was a so-called Iran hostage deal. It's still not clear to me how many of those hostages in Lebanon were actually under the control of Iran and were not actually under the control of Amal and some other groups. But that's a whole nother story. So anyway, Israel, Turkey, United States all get together, finally realize, along with the Brits, and realize their long desired plan to get rid of Bashar al-Assad. He goes. Israel now is proceeding to take territory in southern Syria, and the United States in a makeover, that is just remarkable, where we've taken a guy who was an genuine ISIS beheading fanatic, we will call him terrorist, has been involved with that activity for well more than 14, 15 years, suddenly is dressed up in a suit, is being presented as a Mahatma Gandhi with a beard. He's got some hair and a beard, and is all of a sudden talking peace and, can't we all just get along, doing the Rodney King thing. That was 2 weeks ago. And then the United States says, I remember that $10 million bounty on the head of this guy, Abu Muhammad al-Jalani. Never mind. We didn't mean it. No, save the money. We're not going to pay that out because he's now our best friend. Now, what does HTS actually control? Nothing. HTS is a motley collection of religious fanatics who are under Jalani now masquerading as something other than that. But they've really been a cat's paw, a tool of Turkey and of some of the other Gulf states. They're not in a position to actually make sure that the water's running, that the sewers are operating, that the mail's being delivered, that the food is getting into the stores, that fuel is showing up in the gas stations. That's not their thing. These are fighters, not managers. And to that extent, you can't eliminate their ideological bent. And the images, the movies, the videos starting to populate Telegram right now. They're cutting throats and beheading Alawites, killing Christians. And as a result, the Alawites and Christians, they're arming themselves, they're marching, they're starting to fight back, they're ambushing. That's called a civil war. And so the civil war is going to go on. The problem HTS faces is they don't have the manpower, of a conventional army to go out and crush that kind of opposition. He doesn't have what's Bashar al-Assad had. Then that leaves Turkey. Are they going to do it? Well, the Turks got this other issue. They support the Syrian National Army, the SNA. The Americans support the Syrian Defense Force, the SDF. These are Kurdish, both are tied to the Kurds. This is like a Super Bowl with guns and ammunition. Okay, they're going to fight it out, and this is going to put the United States and Turkey in the potential of being in combat with one another, or at least their proxy forces in combat. So what do you do? So that fight will be taking place in the eastern part of Syria. Meanwhile, the flow of refugees into Turkey, into Jordan, into Iraq are accelerating. And then you come back to Israel in the south. Now Israel's celebrating, look at all the territory we got. Good. Where's all those extra manpower? Israel's not been growing population, it's been shedding population. And by virtue of shedding population, it means it doesn't have a deep reservoir of men that can put on the uniform and go hold territory. And it's already stressed to the point it has not defeated Hamas, even after 14 months, where here's Israel, what we are told, the greatest army in the Middle East. And I guess that's akin to saying that the one-eyed man is the king of the blind. Yeah, they see good with the one eye, but they've been fighting basically an unarmed guerrilla force, a lightly armed guerrilla force, and they can't beat it. And they're good at going in and killing women and children and locking up unarmed people. But whenever they get weapons in their hands and fight back, the Israelis don't do so well, as they found out in southern Lebanon. And now they're picking a fight with the Houthis, stepping up their attacks in Yemen. And on top of that, now they want to control part of Syria. I have just one phrase for them. Go for it, baby. Do it. Just do it. Because the more they extend themselves, the the faster they're going to weaken themselves. They do not have superhuman powers. This is all about logistics, trained personnel, and the missions that they're given. They don't have resources to do everything. The United States doesn't have those resources. Israel in particular doesn't. So what we're looking at now with Syria is a house of chaos that Erdogan of Turkey is going to try to use to his benefit. Now, what's interesting is the fighters, the Turkish soldiers were chanting the other day. I don't have it here handy, but basically it was they were citing the mosque in Constantinople, St. Sophia. Well, it used to be St. Sophia, I guess, and then the mosque in Damascus, and the next one is Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. So the Turks actually remember that for about 600 years, they ruled Jerusalem. That was part of their kingdom. They don't appear eager to give it up. And in fact, they can make a better claim to having a claim on Jerusalem than the current brand of Zionists can, by the simple fact that they controlled it for 600 years. You know, Jews haven't been in charge of that place for well over 2,000 years. So, you know, if you're going to go by the principle that the most recent owner has the right, that puts Turkey in line. Plus, they held it for far longer. So this is going to create a real strategic challenge for the United States and for Trump in particular, because just backing Israel in this doesn't solve the Turkey problem. And figuring out a deal with Turkey means the United States may have to abandon the Kurds, which, you know, is not an unheard of situation. Just ask the Vietnamese, the Cambodians, the Laotians, the Syrians, you know, go down the list of everybody that the United States has betrayed over the years. So, on that cheery note, I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Larry, for your assessment. It's actually been useful since it's so complicated. There's so many different factors going on in this region. So it's useful to like flush the whole thing out. I wanted to ask Helga or anybody else on the panel so far if you have any responses to one another.
First of all, I fully agree with Ray about the Wahnsinn, because I have asked myself repeatedly, you know, if you have an establishment of the neoliberal system realizing or not realizing that all their policies are failing because they cause a tremendous blowback, why is it that they cannot adjust and not, you know, say, okay, we made a mistake and we adjust, but nothing of that is visible. And, you know, according to, I think, Albert Einstein, the definition of Wahnsinn is that if you continuously do the same thing and expect a different result, he defines as Wahnsinn. And by that definition, and the complete lack of reality, I mean, what is wrong with these establishments, and what does it take, you know, to alter this? That's the one point. And the second point, in response to Larry, I would say, you know, what you are describing actually fits, in my experience, the intention of Turkey to create a greater Turkey, because they think in terms of restoration of the Ottoman Empire. They look at the Turk peoples, you know, in all of Central Asia. And, you know, Lyndon LaRouche and I had once a meeting with the Özal government, and I was actually quite astounded at the time to what extent the greater Turkey perspective was in the mind of this government. So, you know, obviously, I would like a comment from Larry on that point.
Yeah, I had a discussion with an Armenian podcast, couple of fellows out of Armenia last week, and they're extremely nervous because they see themselves as positioned between Azerbaijan and Turkey, and the Turkey and Azerbaijan are definitely cooperating. So, but again, I think this is one of those cases where the vanity of Erdogan is clouding his judgment. Because yes, Turkey does enjoy some strengths and some advantages, but last I checked, its economy is not doing that great. Number one, the effectiveness of some of its technology, particularly in the world of drones, has been called into question. But that's what makes Erdogan a wild card here. That because he believes genuinely that he's in a position to try to restore the Ottoman Empire, that he will take actions in accordance with that. And we got some hint of that, I guess, a couple of weeks back, where he said that there are only 2 leaders in the world who have proven themselves with the experience to lead. And, surprisingly, he was one of those leaders, and the other one was Vladimir Putin. So the man's not known for having a problem with humility. So I think, Helga, you're right.
Go ahead, Ray. I see you have a response too.
Yeah, thanks. Those were really terrific responses. The big word here is complicated, okay? And the other word is Wahnsinn, and the other one is thinking that you're exceptional or even indispensable. Now, when Vladimir Putin at the UN in 2015, at the end of September, said, we're not going to let Bashar al-Assad fall to these terrorists. We're going to put our military in there. So just be prepared. And he took Biden aside and said, not by Biden, but Obama aside and say, look, we don't want to get involved in a war over Syria. So let's get Lavrov, our foreign minister, together with Kerry, work out a ceasefire, see if we can deal. Well, Lavrov and Kerry worked for 11 months. And finally, they came up with a ceasefire. And it lasted for 9 days when the U.S. Air Force bombed fixed Syrian infantry positions that had been there for many, many months, ending the ceasefire. So Kerry comes home, and 2 days later, he's asked by the Atlantic Council to comment on this. Steve Clemens, a wonderful interviewer, I was there, okay, together with 500 other people. And this is what Kerry said. Now, I've said this before, but it really throws a light on Munzin, on exceptionalism, and the thought that, catch this, that the U.S. can align things because, after all, it's the indispensable country of the world. Here it is. Steve Clemens says, well, how do you explain the fall of this ceasefire that you worked out with Lavrov? The date is September 29, 2016. So a year after Putin told Obama that he was going to go in there. Okay, here it goes. Secretary Kerry, Syria is as complicated as anything I have ever seen in public life, in the sense that there are probably about 6 wars or so going on at the same time. Kurd against Kurd, Kurd against Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Sunni, Shia, everybody against ISIL, people against Assad, Nusra. This is as mixed up sectarian and civil war and strategic and proxy. So it's very, very difficult to be able to, catch this, folks, difficult to be able to align the forces. Clemens. So in the midst of that, why did you think you could get a ceasefire? Kerry. Silence. The real reason, of course, because we're the United States. We're indispensable, and we can do these things. All we have to do is work our will on these folks, and we can align those forces. Now, we can't align them anymore, and neither can Netanyahu, okay? You got Turkey in the mix here. It's going to be bedlam, as Larry has pointed out so well, in Syria. Just want to point out that era of Wahnsinn and indispensable thought that gets us in lots of trouble, and it's not gone yet. I think, well, Trump is not immune to this this thought that the U.S. can align forces wherever it wants. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ray. I don't know if there's any more discussion on this, if people want to jump in right now. I'll just say that we do have Doctors Against Genocide coming on. Dr. Jabor is with patients. He's a doctor at the moment, so he's not able to get on at the moment. So we will go to him as soon as he's able to jump on. So if there's any more discussion on this, then we can continue. Oh, go ahead, Helga.
Well, I just think that in my studies of history, I think this idea that there are exceptional people, every time a country had that self-conception, it led to a catastrophe. Most notably, naturally, what happened in Germany about 80 years ago. And I think this idea that there are people who are more chosen than others, and I think that that is one of these ideas which should be really scandalized and eradicated, because, you know, out of that comes geopolitics and the manipulation of all kinds of things. So maybe we should make, you know, a resolution that the things to be gotten rid of is geopolitics and the idea of that there are exceptional chosen people, you know, indispensable people, because I think it you know, look at each case is leading to disaster. So that would be my comment on that.
Yeah, if anybody has a response on that, people can continue. Oh, Dennis Speed, he has a question. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yes, but it's not directly on what Helga just said. It's a report for which I would I have a question. So, Ray, were you going to say anything to Helga, or should I just go ahead? I
You're
think
muted.
muted.
Now, I was just going to mention that there's another word that belongs in this context, and that is racism. I say it again, racism. And what I recall is what James Baldwin wrote to Angela Davis way back in 1970. He said, and I quote, I thought I had the quote here, "As long as white Americans think they can work their will on enslaved people, they will feel justified. They will feel justified on working violence on them without respite." And pretty much that's what's been happening. The sorrowful thing is that this has resulted in a world cleaving in two, the BRICS nations being good representative of the most of the people who are people of color. And there's the lily white West. Look at NATO, for example. Did you have to be white to get into NATO? I don't know, but they are all white. Maybe the Turks are a little brownish. So it is a racial divide now, and that could not be more noxious to divide the world that way. We'll just to see if it comes out, but racism belongs in it, and this has been, you know, shown through Vietnam and shown through the world. Nazi Germany was just referenced, so I just want to chip in with that.
Okay, I have a matter, Helga, I wanted to bring to your attention, also Larry and others, because there was an interview earlier this week I think in general it wasn't picked up, and it was done by Oleksiy Arestovich, formerly a advisor to Zelensky, then later a critic of Zelensky. He's been in exile in the United States for a while. He had called for Ukrainian elections in Ukraine from March 2024. He announced himself as a candidate and so on. Now, he gave an interview, 2-hour interview, on a podcast in America, which is one of the Trump community podcasts. This is a guy by the name of Patrick Bet David. He runs a thing called Valuetainment. He has 3 million subscribers, so forth and so on. But during the period just before the election, he was one of, I guess, 8, 9 people that interviewed Trump. Anyway, Arestovich goes on his platform and he said something concerning Putin, which I wanted to report and then just ask, is this how significant this is, and also just to make people aware of it. It's a 2-hour discussion, but they asked him, the question that was put to him is, well, what is your view of Vladimir Putin? What do you think about the actions he took with the special military operation? What do you think is his outlook? So here's what Arestovich said. He said, well, first I will give you the official view. He said, Putin single-handedly took several decisions which were directed against my country. And not only that, the first is when he took away Crimea in 2014, then the whole activity in Donbass. And he said, he's a leader of a country who single-handedly took decisions to go with military aggression against Ukraine. He said, now that is the official view. Here's my unofficial view. Would you like to hear it? And he was asked to state it. And he said, from my point of view, Putin, upon completing Leningrad University and working in the West, and he comes from a political intelligence background, is the most pro-Western Russian politician until now. In his mindset, he has been the most pro-Western. Let's recall what happened when he came to power. His first proposition to the West was to accept Russia into NATO. Then he offered to make Russian missile defense system part of the Western missile defense system. He was the first leader to call George Bush after 9/11. He offered his help. And Putin organized a stopover base for the United States and NATO in Volga, Russia, during the Afghanistan war in 2012. Now, this is the same person that today is saying no to NATO bases in Ukraine. And yet Americans in their campaign in Afghanistan were using Russian territory for their stopover bases in Russia. It took a long time before he switched to an anti-Western course. And I can name you the stages of that process. And he talks about many other things, which I will skip. But he said, from my point of view, Putin is a leader who he purposely tried to set up Russia as a non-ideological state. But he had problems from the people who run soft power, the NGO structures that were bringing in Western influence, operating through the Soros Fund, the USAID, and other things. He said he has some traumatizing experiences from back in St. Petersburg when he was Sobchak's assistant, when he was St. Petersburg mayor, so forth. He said, but then you have to look at the revolutions, the 2002 revolution in Ukraine, when Kuchma took the decision that he wanted to go to NATO, and then look at Georgia, and then look at what happened with the first Maidan, the Orange Maidan. And he said, then go to 2007, Putin's famous Munich speech, where he declares he is now enemies with the West. It took him 7 years to get to that point. And so the interviewer was stunned because this all sounded to him like it was, quote, pro-Putin. And so what was said by Arestovich is, I'm trying to give you a view of the situation from the standpoint of how Putin would see it. He said, and this is important because if you're going to negotiate, you've got to understand what the Russian interest is. Later on in the interview, because I said it's 2 hours, they were asked questions about, would you be willing to negotiate with Putin? He said, you're going to negotiate with Putin. He said, and you're going to negotiate on Crimea. You're going to negotiate on Donbass, etc. And it was clear that the purpose of this was to allow him to talk to the American audience. The way they did it, Arestovich speaks English, but he spoke in Russian, and they had a simulcast done in Russian on the same platform. So the Americans were hearing an English translation as this was being done. So I wanted to just call this to your attention. It would have been about 4 days ago this interview happened. It has several tens of thousands of views now. I think it may even be in the hundreds of thousands at this point. And I just wanted to call that attention, see, is that significant? What you think the significance is? I just thought it might be useful to have a bit more discussion about what's going on in Ukraine.
Well, I think that interview or these statements totally are in cohesion with what I have observed over the years, because Putin was around during the Yeltsin period already, and at that time the Yeltsin period were regarded by Russian patriots as a complete assault on Russia, brain drain. The Soros, was a huge operation to pull out scientists, and the demographic curve collapsed by 1 million per year. There were books written that this was genocide, and that really went on until Putin came back in. And in the beginning, he had a very difficult time to undo that, because the oligarchs had gotten very strong, and it took quite a while. And I think really the second time Putin came in after Medvedev was president for a while, that he really could undo a lot of these things. But I think concerning the patience of Putin, I think that's absolutely true, because if you compare the speech of Putin in the German Bundestag in 2001, which in large part was in German, and he quoted, I think he quoted Lessing and Heine, and he made a huge effort to play up the idea of a common Eurasian security. I think at that point he still was talking about security architecture from Lisbon to Vladivostok. If I'm correct on that, it could have been Lisbon to the Urals, but anyway, he was talking about the integration of Russia with the West. And then the contrast to the speech in Munich in 2007, where he already expressed his extreme disappointment about the rejection of the West of any Russian proposal. And recently he made an interview where he said that, thinking back, he thought that the special military operation came too late, that it should have been done much earlier, and not waiting all these years and have 14,000 people in the Donbass killed, which was acknowledged by the OECD at the time, but no reaction from the West. So I think that that is spilled confidence, and I think now we are at the point where all the trust of Russia in the West is at 0.0, if not below. So I think it's very useful to give such an interview, especially to an American audience, because, as Ray said many times and others, to understand the other side does not mean that you have to agree with every action. But if you don't try to understand where the other side is coming from, there is never going to be a return to diplomacy. And therefore, I think this interview is extremely useful.
Thank you, Helga. We do just hold off, Larry and Ray, on your responses. I see you're very eager. We do have Dr. Nigel Jabbour on, who is with Doctors Against Genocide, I believe the co-founder of Doctors Against Genocide. And he's in between patients right now, so we want to make sure to get him in for this announcement of what they're doing. So please go ahead, Dr. Jabbour.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Anastasia, for giving me the space. Again, my name is Nidal Jabbour. I'm a doctor of internal medicine here in Michigan, a neighbor to Anastasia. I'm a Palestinian American doctor, the co-founder of Doctors Against Genocide. As you all have heard, the situation in Gaza is terrible, especially the attack on the healthcare system. The Doctors Against Genocide, we have been trying to mobilize the healthcare community here in the United States and globally to stand for our colleagues in Gaza and to demand the protection of health care institutions, the hospitals, the healthcare workers. This is a right that is guaranteed under all international laws and international humanitarian law. Unfortunately, we woke up this morning to the sad news of the attack on Kamal Udwan Hospital, the last remaining hospital in the northern part of Gaza. The whole hospital has been burned. All the healthcare workers and the doctors, more than 100 of them, have been arrested and detained. The patients who were able to walk were displaced forcibly from the hospital. Unfortunately, there is more than 30 patients who are severely sick in the ICU units who continue to be there. We don't know the status of them at this point. We know that large parts of the hospital have been set on fire, and it's been on fire in the last few hours since this morning. We have no updates on the safety and the health of the patients who are already severely sick in their ICU units, with no doctors, no nurses to take care of them, and the whole hospital is going on fire. This is atrocious. This is unimaginable. This is something that should not be accepted in any normal or abnormal situation in this time of age. While we here in the United States, we have the privilege of safety, of working, of taking care of ourselves, our colleagues, our patients there are being burned and murdered while they are in their hospital beds. We have been trying to mobilize the community for the last few months and the American people to demand an immediate ceasefire, the protection of the hospitals and the children there. Unfortunately, we have not been receiving much response or help. That's why we are trying to escalate and ask for some medical day of absence titled "We Are Sick from Genocide." We're announcing this to start January 6th this year, calling on all healthcare workers and all employees who have been sick of watching this genocide, this murder of children, day in and day out for the last 15 months. This Sunday, we are holding a live stream conference with our colleagues from Gaza. Whoever is still alive by then, unfortunately, we might lose some of them by the time of this planned event, but we will try our best. It will be live streamed from whoever can join us from our colleagues in Gaza who have been pleading and begging the whole world to intervene and to stop this mass slaughter and this massacre of children, of doctors, of nurses, of healthcare workers, of civilians, of mothers, grandmothers. So please join us. Please try to spread the word. I'm going to share with Anastasia the links for our meeting. It is being prepared in an urgent situation, so we still don't have all the links ready, but we should have them soon. Again, we want the American people, the American doctors, the American healthcare institutions, the American politicians, everyone to hear from our colleagues there on the ground, to hear their plight, their situation, and they are going to be sharing general call to all the good American people to please intervene and do all what you can to help them, to help save what is left from the people, from the hospitals, from the doctors, the nurses there. So thank you. I'll be here for a few minutes if you have any other questions. And thank you, Anastasia, again, for giving me the opportunity to send this message.
Thank you, Dr. Jabbour. And yeah, we'll make sure to put the link in the chat. I've already put the link to your website, doctorsagainstgenocide.org. People can definitely make sure to check that out. But again, if anybody's interested in co-streaming your event after, my understanding is after the event, the video will become available and people can repost it.
Yes,
the idea.
yes, exactly.
Yeah. So if anybody's interested in doing that, just let me know or contact Doctors Against Genocide. if you are interested in reposting this on
Yes,
your
you can
channel.
contact us by email, info@doctorsagainstgenocide.org. You can also follow our Instagram page. It's usually very active and updated, and we share the daily updates on the page. You can also join us at the website and sign up. Even if you are not a doctor, it's not just for doctors. It's for doctor, nurses, healthcare workers, and all their supporters. You can be an engineer. You can be a regular laborer. Everyone is welcome. Again, www.doctorsagainstgenocide.org. Everyone is welcome. None of us alone can do this. None of us can do it alone. We need to join our forces. All the good people of good conscience need to unite together to create a better world. The world that we are living in now, unfortunately, has failed humanity, failed the children of the world, and it is time for all of us to join forces, to think and to imagine and to create a better world, a safer world, a peaceful world for all people all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jabbour. Again, that's Sunday at noon, and we'll make sure the link gets out to everybody, okay? So,
Sunday at noon Eastern time. Yeah, 12 Eastern time. Is going to go for about a couple of hours. And again, it depends on how things go, but that's our plan. Thank you.
thank you. Okay. So we'll continue with our discussion. People can send in questions if they have any questions for Dr. Jabbour. If he's not able to still be on, we can make sure it goes to him and his organization if people are interested. Jose, your hand is raised.
Yeah, just before Dr. Jabbour got off, I just wanted to let him know that I will be one of the platforms restreaming what he's doing on Sunday at noon, and I'll be asking some of my friends to do the same thing. And some of my friends have, much larger platforms than I have. So I just wanted to let you know that, I hear you, and we will make sure that the message can be spread as far and wide as I can possibly do it. And I'm sure the people listening right now will do the same.
Thank you, Jose. We appreciate your help, your solidarity, and your willingness to help. So yes, we are all in the same boat, and we very much appreciate what you have been doing all along.
I think I also saw Ray wanted to say something. Go ahead, Ray McGovern.
I want to thank you, Doctor, and express solidarity with you. And just mention that for Christians, tomorrow is the feast day of the slaughter of innocents, the babies who were, according to the New Testament, slaughtered by Herod. And I have to point out that Herod, as many as he slaughtered in and around Bethlehem, no comparison to how many of the babies and young children who have been slaughtered by the Israeli attacks enabled by, sad to say, the US government. So thanks for your patience and your persistence, Doctor. I admire you and your fellow doctors greatly.
Thank you, Ray. Much appreciated. And yes, thank you for reminding us of this. As Christians who live here in the West, in the United States, we should all be reminded that Palestine is the land of Jesus, and we should not be celebrating Christmas while people are being slaughtered in Bethlehem, in Nazareth, in Palestine, where Jesus was born. And we should at least make sure that we, as Americans, we do not be participants in this violence, the lack of peace, the destruction, the genocide that's been committed in our names, with our bombs, with our taxes, something that we did not agree with, we did not consent with. And it is our corrupt system and corrupt leaders who are abusing their power and putting the American people on the wrong side of history, putting America on the wrong side of history. As Americans, as proud Americans, patriot Americans, we should refuse to be part of this. We should refuse our name, our country, our reputation to be tarnished this way just because our leaders are corrupt, manipulated by special interests, by lobbies, and doing it for only for political capital for all political survivor. We did not sign up for this. We did not elect them to do this. And we need to keep working to fix this system. This system should represent us, the Americans, we, the people, not the interests of the few powerful, of the few lobbies here and there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jabbour. So I think what we're going to do, because we had a prior discussion, and I know Ray and Larry had a couple of responses that they wanted to give to what that discussion was. And then we can come back around. I see there's some other hands that have been raised, and we'll open up for discussion after we have these responses first, just so we don't lose the thread of thought here. But thank you very much, Dr. Jabbour. And
Thank you,
we'll work
Anastasia.
to
If you
get
don't
this
mind,
out.
I'll be leaving now, but I'll keep you updated. And please, if there's any response, get back with me. You have my contact. And thank you, everyone. Keep doing what you do. Be
Absolutely.
strong, be more bold, and be proud of humanity and the humanity that we are going to create, the better one, not this one that our leader put us into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
sir.
much.
Thank you.
God bless. Okay, so just to come back on the discussion that was raised around the Ukraine situation, I know I had to pause both Larry and Ray, who had responses to that, but I think it's important to come back to it, and then we can. I see there's 4 or so people who have raised their hands in the chat. We'll definitely get to the discussion period. So Ray or Larry, if you had a response to the discussion prior, please go ahead.
Well, I'll jump in because I'll be quoting Ray. People need to listen to what Putin says. This is not complicated. This is really simple. Putin is not a Western style bullshitter. He is not one to put out fluff. If you can put him in terms of characters from cinema and television, he's sort of like Dr. Spock from Star Trek. He's very logical. He can get emotional, but he's good at hiding, keeping his emotions in check. And he's made it very clear, look, we were offered a deal that, we'd postpone NATO. I'm not interested in postponing Ukraine getting into NATO. We don't want Ukraine in NATO, period. He's made that pretty clear. They can negotiate a ceasefire. There's not going to be the ceasefire that he's insisted upon now is Ukraine, move your troops out of our Russian republics, out of Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk, move them out. Then we'll talk. Then we can, quote, negotiate about some other things. Freeze in place. We're not interested in working out a situation with Ukraine. We want a security arrangement with the United States and Europe that's comprehensive, that's long-lasting, so that we're not going to be sitting here dealing with this brush fire every 5 or 6 years. I hear what he's saying. I don't think he's kidding. The West seems to think, he doesn't mean that. And, it's shocking that Bill Burns, who, presciently noted back in his 2008 cable, thanks to Julian Assange WikiLeaks, niet means niet, no means no. They're not going to accept Ukraine as a member of NATO. No means no. They're not going to go, we were just kidding. We didn't mean that. Now, we've changed our mind. If anything, the events of the last 10 years, or since 2015 and the signing of Minsk II, have convinced even the most, let's call it pro-Western member of Russia's political elite, that the West and the United States cannot be trusted, that their word is no good, their promises are no good, that Russia's going to have to make its own way. And with each passing day, whether it's overturning elections in Romania, whether it's trying to stir up a color revolution in Georgia, whether it's ousting Bashar al-Assad in Syria, whether enticing and trying to ensnare Pashinyan in Armenia, that the West is like a ravenous locust that wants to consume everything until they see the destruction of Russia. And the Russians have finally caught on and go, hey, these guys aren't our friends. You're muted, Ray. There you go.
Well, Larry, I agree with everything you said. I just call me Mr. Mitty, or call me too optimistic. But if you look ahead a few years into the Trump administration, what is NATO going to look like? My God, it's crumbling. It's already shown itself to be a paper tiger. And now there are people sort of openly disagreeing with what NATO means and what it says. And, you know, this unanimity is supposed to be, everybody's supposed to vote for these things. So if I were Putin looking at this, you know, as I've said before, that would be the final thing. Once you get the Ukrainian troops out of what is now Russia proper, according to those referenda, once you get a recognition that this is a bigger deal, not just Ukraine, we need a new security arrangement in Europe, then I don't see membership in NATO as being the crash, the thing that will crash the whole thing. I think that by this time next year, even NATO will show themselves to be crumbling, not only in Europe, but in this attempt out in the Far East. So I see some leeway there. But let me just say that in more important things there, the reason I can see a lot of hope with respect to Trump is that what he's already said, longer range missile fires into Russia proper, foolish. What do they think they're doing? How did we get into this thing? Now, if Trump were so afraid of being called a Putin pocket guy, you know, he's in Putin's pocket, if he did not feel much more secure than he felt in 2017, he wouldn't say those things. He would say something much less than that. So this is one of those flies, or one of the wisp in the wind that I would cite as a pretty decent. Now, the Russians have also played that, and the Russians are very ready to talk. They say the ball's in the U.S. court, and I expect within another month or so, that Trump's person Kellogg will be going to meet with Putin's designated emissaries, and they'll start talking in realistic terms. Trump can disavow this whole adventure. He says he was against it. He says it's foolish. So there's a lot of room for maneuver here, in my view. Now, the other thing is that wonderful historical rendition by Helga, talking about how Putin really thought that he could deal with the West. Like, you know, it was a sort of Peter the Great revisited, you know. He did everything he could to get the West to say, well, look, now George H.W. Bush said, let's have a Europe free and complete from Lisbon to Vladivostok. Okay, what's wrong with that? You could see we're in shambles. We're no threat to you anymore. The West saw much more merit in building weapons and facing they're trying to dismember and now trying to weaken Russia. So, after this chronology stopped just now, there was 2016 when Putin talked to those Western correspondents. I refer again to that video. It is incredible. He says, look, you know, we asked the U.S., why are you building these so-called anti-ballistic missile sites in Romania and Poland? And they said, oh, they're against Iran. And then that fell apart. So why are they building these things? And look, we're not going to build ABMs. They cost too much. Obviously, it costs too much. We don't have that kind of money. And besides, they don't work. Yeah, they don't work. So we'll work on other things. Okay, that was 2016. Didn't get any play at all. That video. 2018, Putin gets up for his State of the Nation address. Okay, and he does a show and tell all these advanced Russian systems that they're developing, and they're on the screen. And he shows, oh, this one goes around the South Pole, so they're impervious to defense. And so it's a show and tell. That's 2018. Fast forward 2024, Oreshnik got a game changer. Okay, he's got a weapon that has the power of a nuclear weapon without all the problems, without all the radiology or radiation and everything else. And then he says, well, now, okay, now will you listen? Now will you deal? Which is what he said at all those previous junctures. And he says, here's the deal. Here's a modern duel. Let's take a place in Kiev. And you put all your most expensive weapons around it, all your AAA, all your anti-air missiles and so forth. And, you know, we give you time to do that. And then we'll say, okay, now we're going to shoot a Oreshnik and see who's right. Can it be defended against or not? That's the big deal, folks. It cannot be defended against. It goes at 10, 11, 12 times the speed of sound. It has already been demonstrated in Dnipropetrovsk, okay? So what am I saying here? I'm saying that Putin has this long record of reaching out and speaking to the deaf and the dumb in both senses of the word, because after all, we're exceptional. We don't have to listen to a guy whose country is on the skids as we hoped it to be in the late 90s. So that's the frame of mind that Putin is coming out from. And what my wonderment is that he's, as Larry said, always very calm, cool, and collected. I said, okay, you want to learn another lesson? Let's have this little modern duel with the Oreshnik against all your best defenses and see what happens. So he has a certain confidence. And the last thing I'll say is that he has watched these Wahnsinnig, these crazy people, Biden and Sullivan and Blinken, escalate at each stage. And the next tier they have is nuclear, okay? They don't have anything else. Nothing else can get in there within the next 3 weeks, okay? And they're really blaming the Ukrainians for not having enough people to man all these sophisticated weapons, okay? So what's to prevent them from suggesting to a sleepy, inchoate president, which is what Biden is, hey, before we go out here, let's see if we can give the Russians a real bloody nose. The only thing we have is a mini nuke. Why don't we try it? My God, I'm not Putin, you know, I don't rule it out. How can he rule it out? And how can his generals and his admirals say, well, don't worry about it. The KGB analysts say it's not going to happen, right? Generals and admirals have to look at capabilities, not intentions, okay? So that's why we're on tenterhooks. Let's keep our fingers crossed for the next 3 weeks, and hopefully we'll come out of this all right. But it's touch and go right now. As I see it, as I'm delighted to see I'm in the same league with Larry and Helga and others.